In this video, I want to talk briefly about the book review or book review application project in the early part of the course. It's really a pretty straightforward thing, I think, but it may help to get a bit of advice, so here goes. Book reviews, as introduction, book reviews are an important and foundational part of the academic enterprise, at least as it currently exists. It's a way of contributing to the academy and a way to help you be more connected to current scholarship. For this class, I'm merely asking you to contact several journals and request to be on their reviewer list. In other words, you're applying to be a reviewer. You don't actually have to write a review during the class. I just want you to be in process. When I was in my PhD program, I took a course in publishing in higher education, did something similar to this assignment, and had a couple of book reviews published within a year. So it's very doable. So at least that's the goal here, to kind of push you in that direction. There are a lot of journals, some of them familiar and some less so. I've got pictures here of JETS, for example, the Evangelical Theological Society, Westminster Journal from Westminster Seminary, and so on. But some are less familiar. The African Journal of Wesleyan Theology, you may never have heard of. There are lots of journals. When I talked about the book review project when I was in my publishing course, I think I contacted somewhere around 100 different journals, requested a review copy and their publishing guidelines, just to kind of have an index. Back before the internet existed, you had to do it the hard way. So there are lots of journals. So what I want you to do is find some journals, review their publication data to see how to contact their book review editor. Most have a separate editor. In some journals, I just want to highlight, it's a closed review process. For example, at Dallas Seminary for Bibliotheca Sacra, all the reviews are done, I think, in-house by faculty or sometimes by PhD students. So you really can't get on their reviewer list. But most are not. Most have just a simple application. You someone to contact and request. Then you follow the procedures to ask about doing book reviews for their journals, and each will have contact this person or here's what you need to do. Hopefully, you can be connected to several journals through this process. Once you do that, the journals will get copies of books that they need to have reviewed. They will either have a list or contact you and ask if you're willing to do that. They'll send you the book, and voila, you become a book review person, a book review author. So there you go. This process is really quite simple. Now, there are several reasons why you probably want to do book reviews, particularly at this stage in your professional career. The first is that in many ways it's the easiest and simplest way to get published. And that's one of the goals of a PhD program. Well, I really don't know why you do a PhD program if you weren't intending to get something published. It's a lot of money to invest without actually being part of the academic world, and publishing is part of that. Book reviews have the advantage of being fairly narrow in focus. It's not a research paper with multiple sources. You just have to read one book. And generally they're fairly short, 500,000, maybe 1,500 words. So you can crank them out relatively quickly, even in the midst of your other work. So they're a good place to start, get your foot in the door, begin the process. And when you do, they can be added to your resume as a publication. Cool, huh? Another reason to do reviews is you get connected to the most current books in your field. You're reading stuff before most people do, and you get to influence those who may read it later. You're on the cutting edge. So, many times people don't buy books until they've read a review or two of them. So reviewers normally get a leg up in advance for the vast majority of books. Oh, and one more thing, the books are free. Oh, yes, it's free. And often they're fairly expensive books. Sometimes you can be reviewing books that to purchase them would cost $50, $80, sometimes more than $100. So it's a great deal. That's the payment you get. That's all you get, that in your resume enhancement. But I think it's most often, a very fair exchange. So you should do it. But you might ask then, well, what do I do in a book review? Well, if you read reviews, and you should all the time, every journal I get, I read all the reviews, even if I don't read the articles. I maybe don't read all of them, but I scan them and read many of them, because that's the way to kind of keep in touch with what's going on in the larger academic world. But if you do that, you probably have a good sense of what a good review is like and a bad review is like. You'd want to do a good one, but even getting a bad one published is okay. So what would a good one look like? First, you want to make sure you provide some sort of overview. What is the book about? What's its overall organizational or thematic principle? Sometimes you want to highlight these sections, these themes, these chapters, depending on the kind of work it is. Sometimes that isn't easy, but even describing those basic divisions can be a helpful starting point. Hopefully you can do more. Better clarity here than some attempt to be original in your review or witty or something else and not convey the central thesis of the book. There's nothing worse than a book review that doesn't actually tell you what the book is about, and there are those out there as well. Second, I think it's important to note what makes the book distinct. There must be a reason the book was published. Does it make new arguments, provide new evidence, use a new approach to attack a question? That's a very helpful thing to know for a potential reader. So is this something I'd be interested in, or is it not? Is it an approach I'm not interested in? So the distinctiveness of the work is helpful. A third thing that is often helpful, not always, but often helpful, to provide just a bit of bibliographic context. This isn't listing, here are the 18 books on this topic, and this is this one. But even if you can't do that fully, at least helping the potential reader know a bit how this fits in the larger frame of reference for a commentary. You might, for example, compare it to some of the other key commentaries, less technical than, more pastoral than, something like that. If it's an academic, a more academically focused work, the same thing. This builds on so-and-so's work, responds to so-and-so's work, that sort of thing. How does it fit with the whole, in other words? And finally, at least these are a couple things I would highlight. You want to identify the audience. Is this a book for pastors, for laypersons, for academics? How technical is it? Does it depend on language use? Or does it depend on background that some readers may not have? Again, all these observations are helpful for the potential reader. So your book review, you want to think, your audience is people who might be reading the book. So you want to think, who's reading this journal? What's the general audience? And then if they're reading this journal, what would help them know whether they want to read or perhaps even acquire the book? One last thing, of course, if there are any obvious strengths or weaknesses to comment on, do so. If it neglects important literature or approaches, make a note of this. Sometimes this can be deliberate or on the part of the author because of the audience they're targeting, but noting that can, again, be helpful. So it doesn't deal with this. Well, that's what I really want to know about, so maybe this book isn't for me. So that kind of stuff is useful. Of course, let me say one last time, you don't actually have to complete and publish a book review for this course. I just want you to submit to me the list of journals you've contacted. But if you do get to do one in the near future, some of this may help at least. You can't do it all in any one book review, so you always have to think with a potential reader in mind. What would I want to know in deciding if I should buy or read this book? That's the key question you want to answer for those potential readers. I hope this is helpful to you in kind of encouraging you that this is a useful task, and I hope some of you get engaged and maybe even get something published in the relatively near future. I'm excited to see what happens for all of you in this project. Thanks. Talk to you soon.